creatures explained in the Dunwich Horror, with Wilbur representing the forms which exist in actuality, his brother presenting as the failed attempt to rip the thingness from the realm of possibility, and Yog-Sothoth existing, if possible, as the eternal thingness of these things. Against the notion of three separate, distinct forms, the brothers do not relate just by blood. The brothers are twins, sharing even the same DNA. If the brothers are identical, how can one brother exist in a physical sense, more completely than the other, while one grotesquely struggles to exist at all, made up of squirming ropes and no solid or earthly materials? More puzzlingly, how can these two beings come as a product of something so complete and ideal that it cannot even reveal its true visage in nature? Perhaps these three forms, as well as these three entities, create a Mesena being with the tragic human being, with each of the forms reflecting some outer or inward semblance of the human being, as well as those comportments reflecting the forms. As we try to examine the three forms, we find ourselves attempting to place ourselves in only one of the categories. Perhaps we fit the mold of Wilbur's brother as a squirming, gray-colored mass of life trying, but failing, to exist perfectly. Maybe we are Wilbur, a more solid, natural image of perfection, yet furthest away from it. As we far from the thingness of ourselves in the abyss, we also traverse in a circular sense back towards perfection. Cyclic beings such as a human being may experience perfection as a sphere of attempted objectivity, only being able to subjectively perceive perfection. Human beings may exist as a form of perfection, even being the ideal form. Could human beings be the ideal form if human beings are tragically subjective? Each image of perfection, subjectively viewed by the human being, may differ from the next, creating an infinite loop of imperfect flawlessness. We each may view perfection as different variations of thingness, which means there exists a multitude of varying perfections. This leads me to paradoxically understand, as we stray further from perfection, we also grow closer to it. On my reading, the three forms reflect the multiplicity of the human being's struggle to exist not as one specifically, but all at once, meaning there would be no signifying difference between the three, so also none at all. Towards the notion of this struggle, the cosmic entity that is the human being may reflect herself in any of the three forms or characters, as a calamity of universal potential reacted with universal actuality to create the horror of being. Here, the human being's tragic flaw lies in her uncanniness within herself, creating a monster that struggles to occur as a complete presence. We take on the form of the monster, a horrifying being of non-being. As she tries to reach her full potential of perfect humanness, she leads herself further and further away from her unnatural state of actuality. She constantly experiences a physical struggle with herself, her ideal self, and her universal acceptance of all that she can, could, and will be. Alternatively, her terror of herself could cause her to negate her tragedy and split up into the distinct three forms, then causing her to exist in a multitude of forms. If the human being, at home in herself, yet haunted within herself, exists as unnatural in the natural world, is she human at all? As existence is a struggle, the human comportment to don half-faces could also provide insight into the struggle of Wilbur, his twin brother, and their father. As Wilbur's brother has a half-face, which horrifies Curtis, human beings too have multiplicities both externally and internally. The brother only having half of what his father, Yog-Sothoth, has, may insinuate that for a copy of perfection to exist in a natural space would mean for half of the perfection to vanish. Lovecraft, upon my reading, points towards the impossible perfection of the human being faces or hides away from, when faced with her tragic flaw. As we create half faces and speak from 10 or 20 different mouths, just as the horror, we still exist in concord with one true self, which only exists in our personal inward cosmos of thingness. The thingness of us, which we hide from the outside world, can only be revealed or hidden away by us, as if it were to be shown to anyone outside of ourselves, it would no longer be an ideal form or an idea. It would occur as something of nature, in a place where the nature of it is to be separate into the three forms or to be split apart. In echoing the introductory phrase of this paper, after having taken a peep into the shadowland of existence, we see the abyss staring back at us and into us, as the human being and cosmic entities of flawlessness. The potential and actuality of existence lie within the abyss, coinciding with each other and becoming both and neither. The oldest and, quote, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown, end quote. In this culmination of self-understanding, human beings can see themselves, as Plato explains, as universals, constants in the cosmic fabric of the universe. We fear ourselves once we come to face the actuality and potential of our being staring back at us from the abyss. Faced with the multitude of ourselves, we fear the possibility of incompleteness or the possibility of perfection. We deal with the question of perfection, if it can exist at all objectively, if the human being is naturally subjective. We could place ourselves in the role of Wilbur, or as a mangled chaos of a brother, or the whole flawlessness of his father. We could see our home as unhomely. We could see ourselves as unnatural. But as Lovecraft attempts to explain, we belong as, quote, a part of space, end quote, abiding by the natural laws or ideas which Plato and Lovecraft could be offering perception into. Upon my reading, the Dunwich Horror circulates around not what an existence is, in all its perfection and glory, but what an existence could be in its gruesome and ghastly nature. Here, the Dunwich Horror is one of being, and that very fear that comes with it. Are there any questions? Yes, Katie?
Can you expand upon the idea of the circularity of perfection?
Well, there's a quote that says, if you look at an elephant, there's elephants all the way down. And so if you look at perfection, because human beings are tragically subjective and we cannot view perfection as an objective type of idea, each human being has millions of ideas of perfection. So it's perfection all the way down. Chase?
What was the beginning quote from?
It was from the Dunwich Horror. It was from the excerpt by Charles Lamb. Any other questions? Kitty?
You say that humans have, it's like, I haven't read this, so bear with me, but they're the three forms of, like, the human, I guess. So is it like attempting to be those three forms, or attempting to confine yourself to one form that makes the like human way of being so tragic?
Well, it's the idea that we're trying to do both at the exact same time. So we're splitting ourselves into these three forms, and therefore we are connecting ourselves and making us the idea of things in the ether, but at the same time trying to exist in the three forms. So Jason again?
So if you exist as multiple forms, would it just be one form, or would it be multiple forms at different times?
Well, the idea is, as you try to exist as the three forms, you ultimately exist as just one, because you become the three, and therefore you have no signifying features of any of them, so you become one or none of them.
Yeah, Shelby, in that sense, to become these three forms would mean to make them actual, if I'm hearing you correctly, yes? In your dialogue of the actual and the potential.
Well, to become the three forms would mean you would become the potential, you would have the potential to become the three forms, which therefore means you would go back to being none of them and being all of them. So there would be no actuality, there would be only potential, and you would struggle to go in between the actual and potential.
Could you bring that into, talk to us about your last paragraph? You say, we fear ourselves once we come to face the actuality and potential of our being staring back at us from the abyss.
Yeah. So you would see that there is an actuality and there is a potential, and that you are potentially both, and you are potentially neither, and you could actually be both, and you could actually be both. Dayton.
Yeah. So is it the actual goal of the human being to reach that one of those third forms? For example, like Yog Sothoth would be the father of Wilbur and his brother. Is it our goal to go back to that
no struggle to have a complete form of yourself that is not split up into the hierarchy of the three forms. Jacob?
You're trying to define the three forms when you have these stuff as a subjective physical embodiment of an idea. Like, wouldn't you be following the three forms always, even if you try to define them?
Well, that's okay. Subjectively, there would be a very difficult. Can you ask your question again?
So, if the goal is to exist as all three at once, couldn't you only really exist as one?
Well, there is no goal specifically. The struggle of a human being is to exist as the three forms and therefore exist as none of them or only one of them. Tony?
So, if you say that a human being tends to exist in all three forms, yet at the same time not exist in any of them, but exist in one, isn't it against the very idea of the three forms, a very hubristic idea of a human being attempting to exist in three forms? Shouldn't we exist in the form that's subjective to us? Those three forms are separate for a reason.
Well, you went back to subjectivity. The problem of a human being is every single human being is subjectively subjective. So there is no subjective form that a human being can exist in. Nate?
Wouldn't it be ultimately impossible to be all three forms since one's a physical manifestation and the other is non-existent? Would half of a human being have to be non-existent and the other half existent?
Well, that goes back to the half faces and the 20 different mouths. Is human beings do exist in a sense as half of something else. They don't exist as a complete form or something. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. Our next speaker, Ms. Reese Brown, her paper titled The Dunwich Horror of Being and the Struggle of It.